Did you know? There's been dozens of unreleased games throughout history that have since been recovered and preserved online. There are thousands of unreleased games out there, and sometimes a nearly finished prototype emerges. Or if we're lucky, the actual source code of a game gets found on an old surviving disc. In this video, we'll be looking at several canned games, looking at why they were never released and how they got discovered and where they are now. Look out for some exclusive information in this video, as there will be plenty of it from our talks with game developers, collectors, and fellow historians. To give you a prime example of a lost and found game, let's take a look at Super Mario 64 DD, the planned Nintendo 64 disk drive port of the revolutionary 3D platformer. The Nintendo 64 disk drive was a peripheral add-on with a higher 64 megabyte capacity and rewritable storage. Although it first got unveiled at Nintendo's 1995 Shoshinkai trade show, the 64 DD would not see store shelves until December 1999 due to long delays caused by poor N64 sales. This resulted in dozens of games either getting canned or moving back to the regular N64 format. Some titles included early versions of Mother 3 and Pokemon Snap, and a new release of, you guessed it, Super Mario 64. Super Mario 64 DD was shown off at Shoshinkai in 1996, and featured a different title screen, sound engine, and curiously, no face-stretching model at the beginning. Don't be fooled, this is not some lost sequel or expansion to Mario 64, it is a slightly different build of the original game. It's actually not all that easy to make a Mario 64 expansion on the 64 DD, as the base game's code doesn't support the 64 DD's functions. While visiting Japan in December 2013, French N64 collector Jimmy130 found a copy of Mario 64 DD hiding in plain sight at a second-hand shop. The disc was priced at 22,900 yen, about $250 US in today's money, with a build date of November 22, 1996. It was colored the standard gray, unlike the usual 64 DD dev discs, which are blue. Jimmy130 was well aware of what it was. He'd been researching it on his blog since 2008, back when only a few photos were known to exist. 64 DD discs are notoriously fragile and can easily corrupt, but Jimmy130 and other game preservationists were able to get it dumped and documented online. Thankfully, this was one title that was saved for the ages, and a simple tale of a game that became lost media but was fortunately found. Our next story is not only about a lost game, but also a lost piece of hardware for one of the most iconic consoles of the 1990s. In 1993, when virtual reality was a hot new thing, SEGA unveiled a home VR product for the Genesis, the aptly named SEGA VR. The add-on was shown at the Summer Consumer Electronics Show with 2 LED screens, a high-functioning IMU, and a ludicrously low price for the time of $200. For comparison, a basic VR kit in 1991 would typically cost over $250,000 when considering stuff like the graphics supercomputer and positional tracking equipment. The low recommended retail price was made possible due to SEGA's partnership with Silicon Valley startup Ono Sendai. Ono Sendai was founded by entrepreneur Marc in July 1991 in Cambridge, Massachusetts, with the company starting in earnest in San Francisco, November 1991. Pesky had worked in virtual reality since the late 80s and was well aware of the potential it had, and their patented tracking solution used in the SEGA VR could be manufactured for only $1. When the SEGA VR debuted at SCES 1993, 4 compatible games were shown with it. There was Iron Hammer, a tank combat game by Novalogic, Outlaw Racing, a simple racing title, Matrix Runner, a Snatcher-inspired murder mystery, and Nuclear Rush, a high-speed cyberspace adventure intended as a pack-in game. Nuclear Rush was the brainchild of Futurescape Productions, a small California company founded in October 1992 by ex-EA programmers Kenneth Hurley and Kevin McGrath. SEGA of America producer Jesse Taylor, who'd worked with Hurley and McGrath at EA, recommended their new startup to the then president and CEO Tom Kalinske. Kalinske was impressed with the team's resume, and Futurescape got picked as the first of 4 developers on the SEGA VR. As stated in a 1993 press release, Nuclear Rush is a cataclysmic trek into a post-nuclear gold rush, where low-level nuclear waste is bartered as an energy source. You are posing as a nuclear pirate, piloting a hovercraft through radioactive wastelands guarded by heavily armed robots and drones. Kevin McGrath would serve as lead programmer alongside Matthew Hubbard, a veteran game developer behind Atari VCS titles such as Dolphin and Double Dunk. Tom Colley and Rick Lucy would supply the artwork, and Tara Packard would do minor uncredited work on the backgrounds. Futurescape worked closely with SEGA of America and SEGA Japan and was given a prototype headset to work with. Other SEGA VR developers did not. Nuclear Rush was completed and even got a box art painted for it, but due to glitches in the hardware, it had to be put on hold. Preliminary work began on a possible sequel codenamed Chameleon, but it didn't go very far. Even worse, members of Stanford Research Institute were warning SEGA of the hazards of SEGA VR. Headaches and dizziness would occur if the graphics were out of sync with the actual movement of the player's head, and young users could get hurt. According to Marc in a 2010 interview with Audioholics, SEGA took the test results from Stanford and buried them in fear of lawsuits and consumer backlash. The SEGA VR never made it to market, and neither did the truth about its cancellation. SEGA claimed in in the press that the headset was so powerful, so immersive and realistic that it could not be shipped. Suffice to say, that wasn't true. After the death of Nuclear Rush, Futurescape Productions would continue making games for the Genesis, including a canceled title for the Sega Menacer peripheral and a film noir-inspired platformer for EA that was never finished. Futurescape's only credit on a published game was a special thanks on Balls 3D, released by Accolade in 1994. The company would cease operations later that year. Fast forward to July 2020, and co-founder Kenneth Hurley, now a manager at Google, was approached by a researcher from the preservation group Gaming Alexandria. In operation since 2015, Gaming Alexandria primarily focuses on scanning gaming magazines and dumping rare and unreleased games. The SEGA VR games are somewhat of a white whale for staff member Dylan Mansfield, and Hurley was happy to talk to him about his work on the headset. Hurley had kept a vast collection of source code from his 40 years as a game developer, and after a few weeks of chatting, he dug up an old CD-ROM dated August 6, 1994, containing most of the Futurescape library. Although the nearly complete source code for Nuclear Rush was available on Hurley's disk, a compiled binary, an executable build, could not be found. Searching for someone who could put it all together again, Mansfield reached out to Rich Whitehouse, head of digital conservation at the Video Game History Foundation. The VGHF is a non-profit organization founded by Frank Cifaldi, dedicated to preserving, celebrating, and teaching the history of games. In October 2020, the VGHF started the Video Game Source Project, which is focused on preserving source code, arguably the best resource for researching a game's development. Source code helps us know when every asset got made, why some content was cut, and how certain elements changed over time. For example, if we convert the old LBM files in the Nuclear Rush source code to .png, we can see dozens of scrapped graphics as well as the evolution of the game's HUD. While looking over Nuclear Rush's code, Rich Whitehouse quickly discovered problems with the SEGA VR. The refresh rate for its stereoscopic images was only 15 Hz, almost 5 times lower than the 72 Hz minimum for Oculus Quest. Some of Rich's research was especially challenging. Important files like vr.doc and vr.text were completely missing in the Nuclear Rush source, so he had to figure out how the headset worked without them. On his first attempt running the ROM, Whitehouse was met with a blank screen checking for a head tracker. He found out that all interaction with the headset happens through the second controller. Presumably, this is where the headset would be plugged in. Simulating the movements, Whitehouse used the right joystick of an Xbox 360 controller hooked up to his PC. The final steps consisted of building OpenVR support into a working Genesis emulator, which meant repositioning the panels and fixing any peculiarities from 1994. Whitehouse was able to play the SEGA VR on his HTC Vive VR headset, and Nuclear Rush got to run in virtual reality for the first time in over 25 years. The OpenVR emulator, alongside 2 compiled versions of Nuclear Rush, would be released on the VGHF website on November 20th, 2020, as part of their source project. It was the first game for the SEGA VR and the first game by the luckless Futurescape Productions. This was an unreleased game for an unreleased piece of hardware which was recreated without even touching it, a feat that couldn't have happened without Kenneth Hurley generously donating his old work to researchers. Before founding the Video Game History Foundation, Frank Cifaldi ran Lost Levels, a website primarily committed to finding unreleased Nintendo Entertainment System titles. When Lost Levels began in 2003, only 4 unreleased NES games had been preserved online. Today, there's nearly 70, including some fascinating relics like a scrapped 8-bit port of SimCity and a lost license platformer from Capcom, the California Raisins. For those unaware, the California Raisins was created by the California Raisins Advisory Board in the mid-80s as a marketing ploy for, you guessed it, California Raisins. 4 anthropomorphic claymation raisins animated by Will Vinton Studios would debut in a 1986 commercial singing rhythm and blues to a crowd of fruit. The ad became widely popular and turned the Raisins into a merchandising powerhouse. There were toys, comic books, Halloween costumes, 4 studio albums, a 13-episode cartoon series, and, of course, video games. In 1988, the Raisins appeared in an original title for Commodore 64, Apple II, and DOS computers, in which the jazzy dried grapes ran around a cereal factory in search of their lost band members. In December 1989, Applesauce Licensing, who did most of the licensing for the Raisins, announced their collaboration with Capcom on an action-packed Mega Man-style game for the Nintendo Entertainment System called the California Raisins: The Grape Escape. The Grape Escape was commissioned by Capcom USA because they wanted to escape the development stranglehold of Japan and become more independent. Radiance Software, a California-based studio operated by Capcom product development director Christopher Riggs, was tasked with creating the game. Radiance would handle the design while Interactive Designs ironically, did the software. Interactive Designs was founded around 1986 by Rod and Nancy Nakamoto in Torrance, California, and had previously worked on arcade versions for both the Commodore 64 and PC. California Raisins was their first foray into console development. In addition to Christopher Riggs doing design, the game's small staff at Interactive Designs consisted of Robert Morgan on programming, Scott Etherton on music, and Nancy Nakamoto on graphics. As Robert Morgan told Lost Levels, "If memory serves, I programmed The Grape Escape in the summer of 1990. I was in college at the time, partway through the computer science program at Cal Poly Pomona. After class, I would drive up the hill to Diamond Bar, to the home of Rod and Nancy Nakamoto. I remember development being slow since the tools felt particularly arcane, even for 1990. I also only had about 4 pages of documentation on the whole machine, so there was quite a guessing game. Being so far down the chain of relationships made it difficult to get questions answered. Development was pretty fun on this project. We didn't get too bogged down in anything, and the game came together fairly smoothly. One interesting anecdote about the game is that when you press select, the Raisins start moonwalking. Considering the California Raisins previously collaborated with Michael Jackson for commercials, it seemed perfectly on brand. According to Robert Morgan, it was nothing more than a simple glitch. I got some direction wrong and the Raisin was moving backward. It looked like he was moonwalking. We all looked at it and said, hey. In the end, California Raisins: The Grape Escape was finished and ready to go after a development of roughly 5 months. According to Rod Nakamoto, the game's cancellation had to do with its prominent coverage in gaming magazines. In late 1990, Interactive Designs sent a review copy to Game Players magazine for preview. It would make the front cover of their January 1991 issue alongside a 6-page preview. Capcom USA did not tell Interactive Designs that the game was being made in secret, so when it graced the front of Game Players, that was when Capcom Japan became aware of its existence. They were furious and had Capcom USA cancel the project. They refused to publish a game that wasn't developed in Japan. Thankfully, the developers still got paid. Interactive Designs continued doing console work, eventually getting purchased by SEGA in 1992 and becoming SEGA Interactive Development Division. Rod Nakamoto remained with the company as general manager until its closure in September 1996. Radiant Software continued making small NES games for other companies, including Rollerblader Racer for High-Tech Expressions and The Great Waldo Search for THQ. They shut their doors sometime in 1993. As for the California Raisins, their advertising campaign declined because it became too costly for raisin farmers to keep up. The California Raisins Advisory Board ceased operations in July 1994 following the controversy, but the Raisins are still remembered as one of the strangest pop culture icons of the late 1980s. Cut to the early 2000s, and The Grape Escape is considered a holy grail among NES collectors. The promise of a lost Capcom platformer similar to their 8-bit Mega Man and Disney games enticed many gamers. In late 2002, Brandon Murphy, a 21-year-old man from Jacksonville, Florida, sat at a local retailer with his friends when a woman walked in. She had a stack of NES cartridges with homemade labels: Mega Man 2, Platoon, and a mysterious game labeled Raisins. The woman had got them from a friend who worked for some gaming company. They were originally a gift for her son, but the child didn't want them anymore as he had recently purchased an Xbox. Murphy was quick to tell the woman that what she brought in were prototypes and offered to take the Raisins game from her. She agreed and gave it to him for free for his advice. At the time, Murphy did not know this game was unreleased and just wanted it for the Capcom label on the front. After posting about it online, serious collectors began messaging him for the cartridge, sending offers as high as $3,000. Rather than take the cash, Murphy decided to make the ROM available to everyone and donated the binary file to Lost Levels. Many collectors dropped out after this, and the most he could get for his exceptional prototype was $600 from Lionel Hutz, a staff member at Lost Levels and proprietor of the website SegaSaturn.org. They would sell it sometime after. On December 18, 2004, Brandon Murphy would pass away at the age of 22 following a dispute with one of his roommates. As reported by the Florida Times-Union, 27-year-old Angus Wallen and Kara Wynn shot Murphy, took his car, debit card, and remaining Nintendo games, and then lit the apartment on fire. They were convicted of first-degree murder, robbery, and arson. Brandon Murphy will be remembered for his generosity and contributions to video game preservation. His original California Raisins prototype is now in the safe hands of collector Jeremy Smith, who has amassed dozens of materials related to unreleased Nintendo Entertainment System games. DidYouKnowGaming was able to get in touch with Smith, who sent us some exclusive photos of Murphy's cartridge, alongside the original box art for the game painted by artist Greg Winters. Smith tells us he bought the game from an unidentified collector who reportedly owned over 300 NES prototypes at one point. Smith found The Grape Escape hiding in one of the collector's photos and offered to buy the game, along with 2 other prototypes, for an undisclosed price. Note that the original file released on Lost Levels was not in fact the Murphy cartridge, but rather a slightly later gold version of the game sent by Robert Morgan halfway through their research. Murphy's would be released a little bit later. Another unreleased NES game uncovered by Lost Levels is Force Ape. Force Ape is, without a doubt, the most infamous title on today's list. The story of this game and how it got found is a story of mystery, hoaxes, and monkeys in diapers. It's so bonkers we even briefly considered doing a video on just this story, so get comfy for this one. Force Ape is believed to be developed by SEGA, a Japanese arcade company known for shooter games like Twin Eagle, Meta Fox, and Arbalester. SEGA was started by Jun Fujimoto in August 1982 as Seita Kikaku. It was reorganized as SEGA Corporation in October 1985 and found its home in Tokyo, making titles for both the arcade and Famicom. A North American branch, SEGA USA, was incorporated in Nevada in December 1989. In addition to doing video games, SEGA also designed and produced gambling machines, medical equipment, and interactive television products. At its start, most of SEGA's Famicom games took a safer route, in that they were ports of existing arcade titles like 1988's Thunder and Lightning. But as they became more comfortable with the console, their work got weirder with original games like the Twainian platformer The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and, of course, Force Ape. Force Ape made its North American debut at the Summer Consumer Electronics Show in June 1991, and starred a genetically altered superhuman monkey in a diaper, searching for his lost human family in massive warehouses and labyrinths. It was an action game made special by a super speed scrolling technique and buttery smooth character animations, two incredibly impressive things to see on a standard Nintendo Entertainment System. While researching this video, we got exclusive information about the game from the Game Developer Research Institute, a website focused on documenting the companies and people behind classic video games. In 2010, GDRI briefly spoke to Chuck Vowell, Director of Engineering and Product Development at SEGA USA. Vowell was one of 6 members of SEGA USA during Force Ape's production and had this to say about the game. Force Ape was a very interesting property. When we showed at the Summer CES in Chicago, our booth was packed with other developers trying to figure out how we produced those types of scroll rates without supporting hardware. In Japan, SEGA played a key role in the overall function of the industry, developing the software and hardware used by most of the major players. Even the Nintendo software development system used and sold by Nintendo to other Japanese licensees was a SEGA product. As I understand it, these were shipped directly from SEGA. More information on the game was uncovered when the 2020 Nintendo GigaLeak on 4chan gave access to the Nintendo Lot Check. For those unaware, the Lot Check is a process that ensures a Nintendo game's quality before it gets manufactured. When the title gets approved with the Nintendo seal of quality, it can make it onto store shelves. Using this data, we know that SEGA submitted Force Ape for a Famicom release in May 1991. What this means is that Force Ape was most likely completed. There's no definitive answer to why it was never released, but Chuck Vowell recalls many publishers viewing the game as unprofitable. He stated, "After CES, I don't think anyone was really sure if it would be more profitable to release it or accept an offer on it, and possibly never see its release. I do recall that while the innovation was impressive, the game didn't have a lot else going for it. As always, to build in enough to flesh out the game would mean going to larger ROMs and driving the sales price too high to be successful." The April 1992 issue of Nintendo Power claimed the game would be sidelined for the foreseeable future, saying, "Apparently SEGA does not want any monkey business right now." For years, Force Ape eluded collectors. The lack of information combined with the bananas plot of a raging wrestling diaper monkey made it somewhat of a beast in the early days of the internet. On October 26, 2005, a man named Paul Brown would make a post on the classic gaming forum Digital Press. While visiting his relatives in Carson, California, Brown found a mysterious, white-labeled NES cartridge hiding in a box at a yard sale. To the shock of everyone, it was the final build of Force Ape, dated June of 1991 and addressed to SEGA USA. Brown began posting photos of the game in action, and it was more insane than people could have imagined. The monkey would fight against sumo wrestlers and four-armed mutants, running around an infinite hallway searching for his husband, wife, and kids. If the player pushed the A and down buttons, the monkey would unleash a fart attack so powerful that it caused the game to violently corrupt. After seeing the screenshots, the forums broke out into a fight. Some members wanted Brown to dump the game for prosperity, others told him not to, so he could maintain a higher market value of roughly $2,000. Several private collectors offered to buy Force Ape. One person offered to trade it for an NES prototype of the Three Stooges. As the squabble continued, Brown would post 2 surprisingly relevant screenshots. We see some sort of butter monster teasing the monkey. It says, "Ja, I am made of der butter and you are worth 2K monies." The monkey correctly responds by punching the monster in the face, screaming the immortal line, "Eat communism!" By this point, most of Digital Press realized what was going on. Some users, however, still believed Brown and continued fighting for a few more days. Having seen the anger Force Ape caused on the forum, Brown decided to put things to an end. On October 30th, at 8:32 p.m., he would post a photo of the broken cartridge, saying that it was too powerful and needed to be destroyed. Force Ape was no more. In case it wasn't clear, the whole thread was an elaborate hoax. Paul Brown of Carson, California, never existed. He was an alias by Digital Press regular Bratwurst. The cartridge was just a copy of Super Mario Bros. With the original sticker removed. The label was an aged envelope run through a printer and faded out in Photoshop. Bratwurst had been a part of Digital Press since the early aughts and was familiar with fake prototypes prototypes coming up on the forum. Weeks before the creation of Paul Brown, two pranksters claimed to have an unreleased NES prototype for The Legend of Zelda 3, a game that never existed. In a spring 2006 interview with Video Game Collector magazine, Bratwurst said, "The Zelda 3 prototype looked amateurish, and I wondered if I could come up with something that was actually convincing. I felt compelled to give people a reason to be wary in the future instead of confidently dismissing something as a fake or declaring it real at the drop of a hat. Everything was done from scratch while carefully scrutinizing magazine scans with screens from the real Force Ape. I worked within the native resolution of the NES and kept in mind how televisions distort the graphics. Then I piped the images through a TV out card on my laptop onto a 36-inch television and took pictures with a digital camera. The charade was planned to end in a couple of ways. Whoever was going to dump the cart's data would receive an empty NES cartridge with an orange rubber monkey inside. One of the proto-collectors would receive an unannounced package with the Force Ape cart and a Super Mario Bros. Board. I heard from a few sources that some of the prototype collectors were starting to make deals based on the idea that one of them was going to get my cart and share the ROM. There wasn't any intent on my part to scam anyone of their money, and that was a potentially hot situation that needed to be cooled off. I ultimately went with the smashed cart picture because it was so immediate and guaranteed drama would ensue. The thread exploded into 13 pages of people going nuts. In the following years, Force Ape became somewhat of a meme. In 2009, there were plans to turn Brown's game into a real homebrew, but it petered out after the programmer had issues with their computer. A competition cart would eventually be released in 2010 and included 2 levels, 1 boss fight, and a secret volleyball minigame with the Butter Monster. The same year, however, another Force Ape prototype surfaced in a Yahoo Japan auction. It wasn't a hoax this time, it was real. It was in a Famicom Disk System RAM adapter shell, which can hold up to 4 EEPROMs. A standard cartridge can only hold 2. Notified by none other than Bratwurst himself, Frank Cifaldi and the rest of Lost Levels had an emergency meeting to discuss the listing. Getting donations from kind-hearted collectors and forum members, the team placed a bid. The auction ended at 250,000 yen on April 2nd, 2010, amusingly one day after April Fools. Lost Levels managed to get the cartridge, but when it arrived at the home of dumper Chris Koval, a photo emerged of the prototype smashed up in the mail. Thankfully, in the grand tradition of Force Ape, the photo was a fake. The game arrived safe and sound and got dumped immediately. The prototype is now in storage at the Video Game History Foundation, a safe home for the weirdest NES game that we never got. On January 1st, 2022, the VGHF and fellow preservation website Hidden Palace would release a new US prototype from a private collector. It was identical to the Japanese build, but with a slight copyright change. The story of Force Ape has become the stuff of legend, going from a tiny blurb in Nintendo Power to a crazy hoax to an even crazier real game. If it weren't for the hardworking historians, archivists, and collectors in the gaming community, all of these games would have been lost to time. This video would not be possible without them. As always, if you liked this video, feel free to like and subscribe for more facts from Did You Know Gaming. If you'd like to hear more from me, check out the Forest of Illusion YouTube channel. If you'd like to support video game preservation, we've included donation links to some of the best and brightest communities on the web, including some mentioned in this video. Check them out in the description below. Thanks for watching!